If your practice works for you, then it's perfect.
This is a lifetime journey.
It's a very subjective thing.
If you choose for it to be so,
The ideal is a middle ground and a balance.
on the whole, it's not a job for most people.
What devotion looks like.
Learn what you're learning.
There are really no hard and fast rules.
Don't worry too much about other people.
Practice will evolve with time.
No shame.
You're gonna see various
Different things from your peers. It's okay.
You will eventually understand we're all on different parts of our journey.
To have that information is extremely valuable.
It's all relative.
You can use elements from those things and incorporate them into your practice instead of just having one stagnant thing.
I am Georgina.
I'm Nike.
You are listening to Occultism with a Side of Salt. Hello, this is Georgina,
And this is Nike.
and you are listening to Occultism with a Side of Salt. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a kind of fun, yet a little more serious than you would think at first topic, and that is love magic. Love magic is probably one of the things that when people get into the occult, especially witchcraft, are the most interested in. So many people, when they start their witchcraft journey, are interested in love spells and using magic to get the partner of their dreams or to make that man at their office that they think is really hot their lover and obsessed with them and whatnot. And love magic is more than just those specific examples. And we're going to explore all the different ways that love magic can manifest, such as like self-love. But for the majority of the show, as we get beyond the beginning, we are going to talk about the more intricacies of partner and targeted love magic, because there's a lot of ethical debates about it, a lot of misconceptions, a lot of discussions on what can go wrong, as it's a kind of a finicky form of magic in my experience. But before we get into all of the discourse, we have to define what love magic even is. Like, what does it mean to do a love spell?
There's a lot of different types too, and so it sort of breaks down into different, I would call it categories of love spells. And, you know, there's your typical, what we think of in media with like, give your crush a love potion, they fall in love with you, and then all the shenanigans that TV makes happen. Like, there's that one of essentially like forcing love, but then there's also ones that other people will talk about quite frequently, which is self-love, which I include in it. And then, like, for me, it's just three broad ones. So the last one would be essentially attracting love, and it's not necessarily from a specific person, although it can be, like, making them sweeter towards you without it being directly like force them to fall in love, but just a general like bringing in love in general, just like get me a man type of vibes, not get me that man necessarily, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm going to add one more category, and I think the thing that's discussed the least, and that would be love spells on an existing partnership to strengthen a relationship or to get past specific issues. Because I think that is not discussed a lot, but I think like let's say you're having problems with the person you're dating and you want to do a love spell to strengthen your attachment or to resolve some issues, that would still be love magic. It's just not what is discussed as much.
I would agree. I think people don't tend to think of it that way because, you know, you would think, well, my partner is already in love with me, or so you would assume. You know, we assume for the sake of argument here, so that wouldn't be a love spell, that'd be something else. But yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that that would be in the category of love spells.
Well, yeah, I mean, love is such a broad term. Love is just really an emotion, or you can define love in a lot of ways, and that's more a philosophical thing to get into. But yeah, I mean, love doesn't look the same. Like, different people's relationships look really different. Like, different styles of romantic relationships, different sexualities and all that can result in love magic looking pretty different. But I mean, I think the things that we see online discussed the most when you look into like books would be either like attraction stuff, targeted, which is where you like have a target. Sort of like curse work, like how you have a target who's not consenting and you do love magic on them, or baneful magic, which is interesting because you see a lot of similar ethical, like in terms of types of magic that are controversial, I think love and baneful are like the most controversial types. But yeah, those are definitely the most popular. Love magic is very controversial. I'd say almost maybe even more so than baneful, because while baneful magic was very much frowned upon until relatively recently, I feel like the discourse around baneful magic has shifted over the past couple years to now it's almost trendy to hex people, whereas love magic is still a little taboo, especially targeted love magic, which is where the majority of people's ethical issues arise.
I think it gets really tricky too, because if we think about like, follow me here, it's gonna get a little weird. Think about The Little Mermaid, right? The Disney movie. There is also a way to in essence, weaponize love magic, like on purpose. And we'll talk about it later, of course. We'll get into this point. But, the main thing that people will talk about is taking away someone's free will. You don't want them to become obsessed with you. You want to make sure that it's healthy, etc., which is all very good points. I'm not disagreeing with any of that. But there's also like this interesting intersection where baneful and love magic actually, in my eyes, sort of mix and become sort of one and the same, where you're taking away someone's will. And, if we look at The Little Mermaid, Ursula transforms herself into this woman to try to essentially force, I think it's Eric, God, I'm bad at Disney, it's fine, tries to force Prince Eric into falling in love with her in order to get what she wants, and so she's like weaponizing love in that sense for herself. And so if you look at that intersection, baneful and love magic do have a lot of comparisons, especially when you could actually weaponize love magic for a malicious purpose, either to like turn someone against their partner because you want the partner that you would make obsessed with you, or you want their partner to break up with them so that you can get them, and so the partner becomes obsessed with you for that reason. Or for some people, it's like the malicious intent of wanting attention for the wrong reasons, but like knowingly so. So like that comparison of love magic and baneful is really interesting to me because I've always considered them to be essentially sisters.
Well, you see a lot of similar techniques used in love magic. When I mean like targeted love magic and baneful magic, I mean you see quite a few like technique overlaps. You see the same discussions about consent coming up because obviously you're not asking for consent, right? Which, whether or not you need consent for spell work is like a whole can of worms. But yeah, I mean, you're taking away someone's free will and forcing them to do something, just like baneful magic does. I'll get into the consent conversation later because I have some interesting takes on that. But
I think it also gets mixed up with social media a lot, and we see it really popularized in some senses, like with the baneful stuff. I would say, this is my hot take, I don't know how entirely true it is or not. I haven't looked at any like statistics of people doing love magic online or whatever. But my perception of it, at least, is that it seems to be a lot of teenagers that get into it for the obvious reasons of like teenagers are hormonal and they're really emotional. And so when they want their partner to love them, like they get a little bit obsessive about we all do. We've all been teenagers. And if you are somebody who experiences romantic attraction, you probably know what I'm talking about, where when you were young, or if you are currently young, most people are aware, at least to some degree, that their attractions as a teenager were kind of intense and really emotional, kind of for no reason in a lot of cases. So we end up seeing a lot of teenagers performing love magic in the more reckless side. And that's not to say that adults won't or don't, because they absolutely do. There are absolutely adults who perform love magic on people with, the whole conversation of consent and stuff. Like that absolutely does happen. But I found that the people who do it much more recklessly or without much thought or thinking that this is their only option, I have found in my personal experience online that it is more teenagers that tend to lean that way. And social media helps push some of that too, of like almost encouraging it in a sense.
Yeah, well, social media's relationship with love magic is really interesting because you see a lot of people like decrying it and going like, you should never do love magic. That's a consent violation. That's not okay. But in the way that they are saying you should never do something, if you're an edgy teenager, that's going to make you do it. And then you see videos all over like TikTok and stuff of people doing like setups that you can like very clearly tell are targeted love magic. Like they've got like two candles tied together or something, or like very obvious things. Like that's not like if you've got two candles tied together, that is not self-love magic. I'll just say that. That's pretty overt. And then they'll be like, just doing self-love magic. Just doing some Aphrodite worship. And I'm like, interesting choice there. And so they see these people doing these spells, or if they're like, beware, this is super intense, super dangerous or something, it makes people want to do it. It's the same thing with baneful magic, right? Like it gets built up on social media into something very sensationalized, like you see in like witchcraft depictions in the media. And then people, of course, want to do it more.
When I see the same sort of egotistical flexing like we see with baneful magic sometimes, and I'm sure our audience has seen some of this online. If you're in the occult or witchcraft community for 5 seconds, you're going to start seeing some of this, where like in the baneful sense, you see people posting stuff talking about like, I'm going to make your life awful, you shouldn't have fucked with me, et cetera, your usual stuff. But then on the other side, I see it almost like it's for the intention of cursing them. Like, I'm going to make them become obsessed with me so that they ruin their own lives obsessing over me, and I have all the power over them because I know what the dynamic is, and they don't know why they're thinking about me all the time. And so it's essentially to like drive them
insane almost. And it's the same egotistical flexing of like, look how cool and powerful I am. I made them get driven crazy by the very thought of me, and I'm on their mind all the time, and they're just obsessed with me now. And it's like, the way I feel about this is the same way I feel about the hex flexing, which is just, there's no point to it. And I actually personally believe that, and you can disagree with me all you want, audience, this is fine, but if you feel the need to post your hexes or your love magic for like malicious intent online in order to show people how powerful you are, I don't think you're nearly as powerful as you think. And I actually don't think that spell is going to be as successful as you think it is, because if you were doing it for the right reasons, even if you wanted to do it maliciously, anybody who's done baneful magic or intense love magic like this knows that the first rule is you don't post it online. It's just dumb to do that.
Well, I feel like some of the ways that love magic is used in this like malicious thing is, it's almost like domination magic, which is something that you don't see discussed a lot, but like magic to control someone else or to exhibit power over someone else's life. It becomes some of these spells like less, like it's no longer like, I want, like some of these, like target is a really good word for it, because it's one of those types of magic where you have an explicit target that you're going for. And it no longer is like, I want a good relationship with the person. It becomes this domination and this like spiteful thing. I've even seen people post like, this man thought he could leave me on red. Now I'm all he thinks about. And I'm just gonna put this out there. If you do a type of love magic to make someone like completely obsessed with you and have no free will and completely submissive to your magical desires because they ignored you, it doesn't really seem like the foundation of a healthy relationship. I think love magic is really tricky because a lot of the times when people turn to love magic, it's when a relationship is not fulfilling them, and it ends up almost prolonging a toxic situation or an unfulfilling situation for the practitioner.
I agree. And it sort of becomes, in a sense, like a magical gateway into abusive type thoughts. And that is not to say that people who do this are inherently abusers. I'm not saying this at all, but there are a lot of things that could easily lead us to toxic mindsets. You know, if you're in a really unhealthy relationship and let's say your partner accuses you of cheating all the time. So you say, well, if they're going to say it all the time, I might as well do the crime that they're accusing me of. And so it leads you into like that toxic dynamic of cheating. Or if somebody is being mean to you or they're ignoring you or whatever, when you jump to, well, I will do love magic to make them obsessed with me. How dare they ignore me? That is a toxic mindset that can lead to a pattern of toxic behaviors if this becomes your sort of default go-to. And then that leads to becoming an abusive person. So you really have to watch yourself in a sense. And like, none of this is to say that love magic is entirely bad and you should never ever do it. Like that's not my opinion, but you do have to watch. Just like with baneful magic, it's the same thing for me, where if you end up using it as your go-to before trying to do other resolutions, if your partner's been ignoring you and you turn to love magic first to dominate their will and make them like become obsessed with you again and reignite the flame or whatever, if you turn to that before trying to like talk it out with them, find healthy ways to make the relationship work, or just choosing to leave because clearly it's not working properly, I think that is where you run into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, well, love magic is really tricky because the thing about it is like a lot of the time people go to it to avoid having hard conversations they don't want to have. They see love magic as a way to sort of jump past the messiness that comes with relationships and love, because love is really fucking messy. Relationships are hard, and finding a good partner is hard, and maintaining a relationship is hard. That's not like an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time. And love magic is such an easy way to jump past the putting in the work and time thing. You can just see it as a way to like not have to put in the effort and not have to be as worried. And then it can become just a way to avoid processing things healthily. Because when you're in a relationship, the most important thing is communication. And if you're going behind someone's back and doing a ton of spells on them without telling them first because you want them to do something that they're not doing for you, I think that problem is less a spiritual one and more one where you just need to talk to them, because one, it's going to be probably more effective, and two, it's just like I think a lot of the time we see these really like domination heavy like love spells. I just wonder like how would the partner feel about that if they knew that was what was happening to them? Because someone doing like some super hardcore, like you think about me all the time love spell, like I feel like if I found out that a partner of mine, honestly, this is one of the reasons why I avoid dating other occultists generally, just because I don't trust other occultists sometimes. Like I feel like that would make me lose a lot of trust in them. I would kind of second guess my feelings and be like, why am I in a relationship with someone who doesn't want to talk to me first or like consider my communication? Like I think two people in a relationship doing a love spell together to strengthen their relationship is very, very different from someone going behind their partner's back and doing a obsession spell. Because I think with love magic, we see a lot of it where it's done behind someone else's back. It's not something that they know about. It's purposely insidious.
Right. And that point about like, if my partner was an occultist and I found out they had done a love spell on me before we got together in order to get us together, I would view that much the same as if they had like saw me in public, stalked my social media, decided I had to be with them. So they figured out what all my interests were, found out the places I hung out the most often, like essentially cyber stalked me and then found out my interests from my online social media and then used that in order to get me to like them. That's exactly how that feels to me. Like using magic to get somebody to be with you without them knowing just feels really skeezy. And if I found that out, I'm going to be honest, it might be a full-on breakup deal breaker for me. Like it's such an invasion of like, obviously free will, but like almost emotional privacy, if that makes any sense. I just would never be able to fully cope with that, knowing that, well, if they're willing to do that, what the hell else are they willing to do to get me to do what they want? You know, like it makes me inherently distrustful just on the whole of who they are as a person with any decision they would make in regards to our relationship. And the communication point makes me think of actually a story from when I was in high school. I had two friends that were in a relationship, and one day, like it sounds such like a made up anecdote, but it really is just the literal truth. Before school had started, we always hung out in like the main area of our campus area, and they came up to me and they were like, I'm having so many problems with my girlfriend lately. Like, it's just really stressful and I don't know what to do about it. And the only words I said were, well, have you talked to her about it? And they said, well, no. And that's exactly what love spells without consent feel like to me a lot of the time, where it's like, if you're doing it on your partner in order to fix relationship issues, but you haven't even spoken to them about it, why are you turning to this first? Like, yeah, it's hard. It's messy. Like, nobody likes to have the really tough conversations that could lead to potentially a breakup if the issue is serious enough. But why wouldn't you talk to them first? It's so dumb. Like, have you talked to her? Well, no. Then how's she going to know that there's an issue? Have you talked to your partner about this thing you want changed? Have you talked to them about the issue you're having that makes you go to love magic? If no, then maybe you should talk to him first. It's like doing divination before doing anything. You want to make sure you're taking all the mundane steps beforehand too. Like if you're doing a job spell but you're not submitting applications, what's the point? Doing a relationship love spell is kind of that same vein.
Well, I think a lot of the time with love magic, it's very much self-serving, which isn't a bad thing. Like doing things for your own gain and pleasure is a completely valid thing to do in your spiritual practice. However, I've noticed when we talk about love magic, and even some of the love magic I've done in the past, it's a lot less about like attracting a specific person as a person, but rather to get some fantasy version of a person or to make someone behave like your fantasy or to attract someone who is like the perfect person you visualize rather than who they actually are. And I feel like a lot of the time there's a thing, like I think we've all seen people when talking about their partners outside of a romantic outside of a magical context be like, I think he likes the idea of me, but not actually me. And I think we see a lot of that with love magic. In my own experience, a lot of the time I've done love magic, even just general attraction, like without a target or without trying to fix a problem in a relationship I already have, like just to attract someone. It's like I'm sort of making a list of things I want in a person and like being like, I will conjure the perfect person for me. But it's not really like I'm conjuring like a human being, but rather an idealized person, if that makes any sense. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's oh god, I don't remember who was saying this. It might have been Magical Lady Duchess talking to Olivia. I can't remember, but I remember hearing somebody in the occult sphere talking about how when they were trying to attract a partner, they were with somebody else, but they just did this thought experiment of like, let me write down all the traits of my ideal partner, and I want to just see, without thinking about my partner, I want to see what that is. And she had like written it down and essentially like manifested it. But she had like written down all these traits that she wanted, and it wasn't like they have to be this way. It's just something I want. And then years and years later, this person came into her life, and in trying to manifest this ideal person for you also helps you cement what do you want out of a partner? What are your ideals? What would be the best case scenario for you to have somebody, regardless of if you're single or in a relationship or whatever? What are the actual things that you think would be the 100% absolute best partner for you? And she ended up manifesting that exact partner in her life years later. Like she found it like buried in the back of her closet, hadn't even thought about it for like 10 years, and then read through it and realized, oh, the person I was with then is not this list, but the person I'm with now sure is. And it was just like an interesting sort of like look at that. And I think, yeah, just like looking at the ideals is a big important thing.
Yeah, this is going a little bit off what we originally planned to talk about, but I think this is an important thing to note because this reminds me of something we see in the Thelema community a lot with this idea of the Scarlet Woman. So a lot of Thelemites get this idea from what Jack Parsons was doing, where he essentially like manifested a person. Essentially, what happened was Jack Parsons tried to manifest his Scarlet Woman, and then he met a woman named Marjorie Cameron, who was basically that person, and she had red hair, and then they became partners for a long time until, obviously, Jack Parsons died, and then Marjorie Cameron kind of lost it and ended up destroying a lot of her own paintings. And you see a lot of men, when discussing Marjorie Cameron, acting like she was invented by Jack Parsons, when in reality, Marjorie had already existed and had already read about Thelema before she met Jack. Like we see this from men a lot, where they like, in the Thelemic community, really idealize this idea that you can like conjure the perfect person. And so when they meet a female occultist, sometimes they'll be like, you're my Scarlet Woman, I manifested you. And then the person obviously is like, wait, what? You did not manifest me, I already existed. And it becomes this kind of like objectification of people in a really, this is a very specific thing in Thelema, but like it's a very much an objectified, like there's something kind of dehumanizing when someone's like, I manifested you, you're a product of my will, now you have to be with me. And I think like this tendency, while it's so dramatic in the Thelema community, sort of exists in the wider occult community. And it's like this depersonalization thing that comes along with like the very like, I'm going to summon my ideal partner type stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a really important note to put out there, is if you're going to try the like manifesting your ideal partner thing, which is not bad. I actually encourage it quite highly, if you couldn't tell, for various reasons. But if you're going to do that, don't go the route of then like carrying that list of traits in your pocket and searching every corner of the world for the person that fits exactly those standards, and anybody that doesn't match up to your expectations, so therefore you can never be with them. Like don't make it like this is now your forced ideal. It's just a good thought exercise for you to think about what things you want and to maybe try to manifest more of those traits in a future partner. Like it's a good thought exercise, but do not let it run what all of the rest of your relationships, quote unquote, must be for the rest of time. It's not meant to be like, this is what my life must have. You know, do what the story had, which was she put it away in a closet for like 10 years and didn't think about it. It just happened to be able to coincide later, partially because of manifestation, partially because, you know, being able to look at what you want helps you make a clearer idea of what you want your life and your partner to be like. And it can also just get real funky sometimes if you obsess over it. And like obsession becomes a big part of the concerns when it comes to love magic. Not just obsession on your part, but obsession on the part of your target towards you.
Yeah, obsession is a big part of this conversation because I think a lot of love spells sort of revolve around obsession. There is this intensity that you see in love magic. Like, I'm gonna be real, like most love spells are not, I'm gonna light a candle and it's gonna be like, maybe someone will come into my life, maybe they won't, I just want a casual, like, relationship where I go on like 3 dates and then don't talk to each other again. That's really not how most love magic goes. Most love magic is like, I am attracting my ideal partner, I am bringing them into my life, I want a serious relationship, or it's like, this person I know will have sex with me, they will be my partner, they will be with me, they will think about me all the time, I will rule their life, they will be obsessed with me, or like, my relationship is doing bad, so it will be perfect. There will be no issues from here on out, everything will be solid. And a thing that we see when we talk about manifestation is to use very strong statements and say things like, I am, I will, not like, I want to. But I think we see this just obsession in so much love magic. Like more than I want X thing. It's like, I will have this and it's very, very like almost aggressive. There's this like martial quality, I think, to a lot of love magic where it's like, I will have this person. They will want me. And it's this not this casual, I will attract something. Because a lot of these attraction spells are like really, really intense. Like I want like the perfect person for me for the rest of my life. And I think we need to realize that relationships are like not gonna start running like 100 miles per hour. And doing an attraction spell on someone isn't going to make them immediately want to marry you. And I think that people who cast a lot of love spells or do a lot of love magic tend to really fixate on this stuff and be extremely obsessive about it and be obsessed with finding the person for them. And it develops with people who you see doing a lot of love spells on a lot of different people very frequently. Like people who do love spells on like everyone they go on a date with, right? Because I've met people like this. These people do exist, which I mean, I get it. It makes sense. But the idea of love and the idea of this partner starts to rule their life and can kind of degrade their mental health because they start like feeling like a lot of kind of loneliness and rejection when their things aren't exactly what they want. And they let this like idealized relationship rule their life rather than thinking about like realistically how love works or what like realistically a partner can be. And it can become very toxic for even the practitioner if they're just steeped in this obsessive, really aggressive, domineering love energy all the time.
And on the other side of that, often I would argue even mixed with that is the consequences of making your target obsessed with you. And the horror story I hear a lot, and it's very, very common because, if you're not being very careful and very specific with your words, this is often the result that comes about, which is you cast this love spell on somebody that you want at the time. But, as it goes, sometimes things are fickle and it's more of a physical attraction or you're less attracted to them than you thought you were, or like, their ideas are not what you thought they were, or something gets revealed or whatever reason that you start to lose attraction. So you've done this love spell on them, but you started to lose attraction. But when you've done this love spell and when you've done it in a manner that is pretty strong, which like strong phrases are good. This is why specificity is important. If you use phrases to make them fall madly in love with you, you're all they think about, you're on their mind all the time, which could be like from a very sweet place, like you want them to be thinking of you sometimes. But when you make it so much more intense, so you no longer like this person as much, and you're ready to just call it off. Well, you've made them obsessed with you. You're on their mind all the time, and maybe you break it off or you break up, and so they become your obsessive ex, and they won't leave you alone, and they stalk you, and they harass you, and you're all they think about, and they can't get you off their mind, and they visit your workplace, they're thinking about you all day, they get angry that you're not with them. Like, it can very easily turn quite bad because you've made this person obsessed with you, but you don't want to be with them anymore. So now they're obsessed with you, but they don't have you, and any number of things can go wrong with that, even just them not being able to get over you. Now you're making their life worse because they're not able to move on because of this love spell you did on them. And so, like, it's part of the free will and consent thing, but it's always just like a general, you need to consider all the things that go wrong or could go wrong when love spells like this happen. You have to consider what happens if I don't like them anymore. What happens if I'm ready to call the relationship quits? And what happens if we're together, but them being obsessed with me turns into this hardcore heavy jealousy. They think about me all the time, but they can't stand the thought of me being with other friends. Like if we go with the typical heterosexual relationship, if you're a woman and he's a man, if you want to have guy friends, he might not like that because you're on his mind all the time. He's thinking about you. He's very, very like fixated on you as a person, your relationship. And so it can become quite controlling that way. It can influence that behavior to become more extreme. So you never quite know, like the obsession doesn't just have to come from your side, although it can, or maybe not from you, but from the person that might be doing it to you. You have to really consider what can happen with love magic. And obsession, I think, is the really, really key word to use.
Yeah, I mean, there's something pretty dangerous about some of these situations. Someone being obsessed with you as an idea is a lot better than the actuality of it. I think when we're doing love magic, something we consider a lot is our ideals and our goals rather than like the practicality of that. If someone is thinking about you 24/7, that's probably not what you actually want, because while that as an idea is nice, like, oh, I'm so important to them that I'm all they think about, I'm all they value in life, I'm their number one priority, that sounds pretty nice, right? But when you look at how that actually plays out in the real world, you see that like that will result in that person being very, very clingy, very controlling. They'll want to know where you are. They'll want to know what you're doing. And that is something that a lot of people can't stand. It makes them very dependent, and it can result in a lot of codependency, which is very unhealthy for a lot of psychological reasons. It can result in them not doing well at their job and thinking that you're more important than their job and end up hurting their life in that way. They could kind of throw away their friendships to focus more on their relationship and spend more time with you and let other things in their life fall to the sideshow. And that is really kind of taking away from their life. And I think you need to think about, like, if I love this person so much, how am I willing to affect their life? Because when you do these type of spells, they affect the person's life. And if you really care about someone, you should be careful about what you're willing to do to them and just think about like how it impacts them. I think something that is interesting to bring up is this idea that I've seen online that I would never, it's a sentiment sort of anti-love spell. Not anti-love spell in the idea that like they're worried about the ways that love spells can go wrong or like become a stalker situation or become unsafe, but that any love created in the love spell is not real love at all. What are your thoughts on that?
I would agree. I think if you are making somebody love you with magic instead of trying to get to know them, I really don't think it's actual love. I think that it's more, like I said earlier, I think it's more like the case of somebody cyber stalking you to get all your interests, to get to know you, to essentially coerce you into quote unquote loving them. But they've done this without you knowing, they've done it without your consent, and they have manufactured the perfect relationship for you to fall in love with them without it being legitimate. They may change things about themselves. They may change their appearance. If they think you're into guys with long hair, they might grow their hair out. Or if they think you're into tattoos, they might get a tattoo. They might dress differently. They might act differently. They might listen to different music, or at least have a playlist that they play when they're around you. Like, if they have to manufacture love in any form, either by like cyber stalking you in this case, or in the case of love magic and manufacturing feelings for the relationship to happen, it's not real love. You've made them believe a lie, and they don't actually love you. They love the manufactured picture, either magically or through whatever other mundane means. It's never true love if they don't love you. If they love the idea, or they love the feeling that you have given them through this manufactured thought, through making it seem better than it is. It's essentially a mirage, like almost in the way that we talk about like glamour magic, right? It's not real. It's an illusion. It's like writing the perfect story for this person, but that story isn't you. It's just a story. It's made up. So it's not love. I don't know what you would call it. I know that there's a word out there for it, but it's just a lie at the end of the day. It's not love.
I think that brings up, I feel a little similarly, but there was a counter to the consent conversation that really kind of struck a chord with me. So I was very much of the idea that a love spell is a violation of consent, because you're forcing someone to be with you, and that is essentially a complete consent violation. And as someone who is a feminist and who thinks that like things like sexual coercion and sexual assault are very wrong, I kind of had an issue with love on that stance, because I was like, well, if you're forcing someone to love you, that's coercion. That's essentially a little assaulty. And then I had someone bring up the point that, like any other type of magic, like money magic or job magic, like there has to be a possibility of it happening anyway for it to happen. Like, let's say you manifest a job, you have to at least be applying for jobs to get a job spell to work. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And so it raised the idea in me. I'm like, well, could you really, truly violate someone's consent completely if the thoughts weren't at least there, or the opportunity to be together wasn't there? And in that sense, is it really fully violating free will? Is it really fully a consent violation? Because obviously there has to be some level of interest for a love spell to work. And that sort of shifted my opinions a little bit. Like it made me feel like, oh, maybe there has to be like a level of attachment and the love spell just intensifies it. What are your thoughts on sort of that counter argument?
It's going to be a little bit of an intense comparison, but I feel very strongly about this just because like emotional attachments are such an important part of who we are as people. But in my head, saying like, okay, to me, it's the same as saying like, there was an opportunity for us to have sex. We could have had sex in this moment. And to me, a love spell is like getting them drunk. Maybe they would have had sex with you sober, sure. But if you feel the need to get them inebriated in order for them to have sex with you, you've violated their consent. And it doesn't matter if they put, like, this has happened, not this exact case, but the case of, like, them manufacturing a situation for us to, like, hang out or making me think that we were cooler than they were in order to get something from me. It violates consent, because if you would have just asked me up front, I might have said yes. In most cases, I probably would have, because I try to be nice and I try to be very accommodating when it comes to certain things. Not necessarily with sex. I'll say no if I want to. But, like, if they had asked me for this favor, just straight up asked me, I probably would have said yes. But if they have to lie to me or coerce me or set up a situation where it makes me feel like I have no choice, it violates my ability to be able to make a choice. And so if you have to manufacture that situation, my consent is no longer a thing that you have chosen to consider. You've chosen to go behind my consent and say, well, I'll make it happen anyway. I'll get her a little drunk. I'll manufacture a situation where this feels like it's the right thing to do, even if it's not. I don't need to ask them. Why bother? I'll just do some magic about it. Like, that's what it feels like to me. I don't feel that, sure, maybe the situation was there. Maybe they would have fallen in love with you anyway. Maybe it could have been natural, and maybe you still would have ended up here anyway. But you don't know that. You took away the ability for that to be known. You took away that choice. You made it happen on your own. And so if you're forcing somebody into a situation, you're not just attracting a better situation or whatever. If you're doing a full-on domination love spell, maybe they would have, but you will never know because you forced it to happen anyway.
That's a really interesting counter, actually. I actually think I might agree with that. I actually have not fully made my real change of opinion since the person brought that up to me. Yeah, I think just something that we forget is that love magic that's targeted is still coercion. Like, it's still, like, I think love magic that's targeted and is to make someone like you, whether they like you or not, organically, versus you and your partner coming together to do a spell to strengthen your relationship is just such a radically different conversation. And I think that's something that if you're going to do this type of spell work, you need to really, really consider. Also, something you're going to want to consider is how your own conscience is going to feel about it, because just like with cursing, right, there's a level of potential guilt that you could feel from like doing the magic, right? Like, when you do these like really baneful workings, something that I think is important to remember is, like, how will you feel about it? How will you feel sitting in your room when you see someone's life fall apart and know that it could have been your doing? And I think with love magic, that's something that you're going to have to consider, because if you're going to do a targeted love spell on someone, you're going to have to think, when I'm laying in bed with them and that thought creeps into my head that maybe this isn't real or maybe I forced this to happen, how will that affect me? How will I feel when I'm sitting in bed and wondering, like, if this would have happened regardless, or like questioning if their feelings are real towards you, and sort of the inner anxiety and turmoil that could cause? Because I could really see someone doing a targeted love spell and then feeling sort of like mystical regret about it, and they're like deep into this relationship that's formed, and it's formed really cleanly. There's no like crazy stalker situation. There's no, like, it hasn't gone wrong. It's gone perfectly according to plan. I feel like that would kind of haunt me a little bit, like knowing that I could have made this happen and it's not real. I feel like that would cause like a level of insecurity in the relationship potentially and make me feel kind of weird about it. I don't know. That's just food for thought. If you're doing targeted love spells, like how will you feel later down the line when you're thinking about it and you're like, is this even real?
I'm quite inclined to agree with that. I think that ultimately it comes down to what do you think is acceptable and moral. And I'm not saying that everybody's views on it must be the same as ours. Of course, everyone's going to view love magic a little bit differently. But it's actually, like, I'm willing to do baneful magic here and there quite carefully. Don't get me wrong. I'm not just going to do it willy-nilly. But specifically targeted love magic, especially in the category of like domination style targeted love magic, it's actually the one form of magic I won't do. I know that it's not really the right thing for me and the way I view it and the way I view the world in relation to that. It's just not a thing that I think is right for me to do. So I personally, again, not saying what you should or shouldn't do, it's just my personal opinion and for my own morals and my own way of living my life. It's the one form of magic I really can't imagine myself ever doing if I was in a healthy mindset. Because for me, if I want love, I either need to do some work on myself, which is often the case, or I'll do like attracting a partner if I'm in a healthy place and I just, I'm wanting a relationship, because we all get there. It's nothing wrong with, if you are a person who experiences romantic attraction, if you want a partner. There's nothing wrong with wanting a partner. So, like, you know, I might do an attraction spell in general, like attracting a partner, but not like a person. But a targeted domination love spell is just not something I think I could ever bring myself to do, not in good conscience.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I go back and forth on this stuff a lot. I don't really feel bad about doing, like, once you're in a relationship, like doing strengthening spells, or like if it's like mutually agreed upon or something. I go really, really back and forth on targeted stuff just because I've seen it go wrong so many times. I've seen these love spells go weird a lot. I think love magic is one of those examples where we see, like, when we do magic, we don't really have complete control over how it actually manifests. Like, you know, like you'll do a job spell and sometimes better example, you'll do a money spell and you'll end up getting like a bunch of hours added to your shift and then you're working and you're kind of miserable. Like, we see that play out in a lot of types of magic, and it's a pretty common, like, conversation, like when things work but they work kind of weird. Some people would call that backfiring. It's like a half backfire. It like kind of does a monkey's paw on you. But I think in love magic, when that happens, it's like, it's bad. I think love magic is something that we want to do so frequently when we're a new practitioner, but I think it's really one of the most sort of advanced things you can do because it's so easy for it to go horribly wrong. It's so easy for you to do a love spell and it just not perform the way you're expecting it to. I think it's something to be very, very careful with and just really, really consider, just like baneful magic. Like, we talk a lot about baneful magic causing, like, backlash or going south or whatever. But love magic can do the exact same thing, and in some pretty nasty ways. There's just so much emotions tied to this type of stuff that when it goes bad, it goes bad.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So my final thoughts are that if you're going to do a love spell, I just generally don't recommend a targeted domination love spell. That'd be obvious by now, I would hope. I don't see anything wrong with pretty much any of the rest of the types. If you want to do some drawing self-love, absolutely go for that one, for sure. Everybody could use a little bit of self-love, self-care. If you want to do attracting love in the general sense or attracting your ideal partner, go ahead and do that. I think it's a great thought exercise at the very least. And ultimately, I think the best form of love magic is shadow work, which sounds a little weird, but every time that I have been inclined, not necessarily towards love magic, but just towards that sort of avenue of thinking, it always signals to me personally that I have some work on myself I need to do, and I need to figure out what is making me feel this way, because for me personally, it's always sort of an insecurity thing. So, you know, if you're sort of in that area and you're considering some of this, maybe try some shadow work, because I think that helps everybody no matter what position they're in their life.
Yeah, just be really, really careful with love magic. Don't think of it as a super extremely easy thing. I would not make it one of your first workings. At the very least, take that stuff seriously. Do not just copy a love spell you've seen online. Be very, very, very careful with that. And think seriously if you want to go through with something like that. Just do it with a lot of caution. Be very, very careful if you're doing anything love-related. And consider all the potential outcomes and just take it seriously and think about how it's going to affect you later on and how it may affect your partner. Because if you're doing a love spell on someone, I'm hoping you care about that person and want them in your life and like them. I would hope at the very least that's something that you're considering. And just to be very pragmatic with it and do a ton of research. Don't be too impulsive about this. Don't take it lightly. Give it the seriousness and caution that it deserves. So, this has been Georgina. Interestingly enough, I have a love magic ritual guide up on my Patreon. It was my Patreon tier reward for $15 tiers or higher this past month. Also on my Patreon, you can get herbal preparations and extra videos. I'm also under the name .darling everywhere on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and of course Patreon. And that's me.
And I've been Nike. You can find me at Warrior Witch Nike pretty much everywhere, Instagram, YouTube, and I also have a website, it's warriorwitchnike.com. And if you want to see me a little bit more unhinged, you know, you can find me at Warrior Witch N on Twitter because the naming convention is just a little bit too long for their system. You'll be hearing this a week after the fact, but you'll probably see a lot of political stuff from me on there, but I promise that won't last forever. At least not as intensely.